Welcome back to Whiteout Weekly on a fourth glorious victory week as Penn State moves up to number 7 in the AP poll at 4-0 after defeating Illinois 21-7. Shout out to Tom Allen for that defensive masterpiece. Mwah. Hanging in the Louvre. Abdul Carter is a testament to that. Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week. Absolute animal. 8 pressures, 2 sacks, 4 stops, forced fumble. That last play where he kind of was spying the quarterback and then just flew to him was just reminiscent of him as a linebacker. And I love how they talked about it. They moved him around from
Mhm.
edge to kind of QB spy to just moving around the defense. Loved it. A little reminiscent of Andy Diaz. So we had 2 sacks coming into that game, right?
Two total, yeah.
And we had 7 on the day. Absolutely dominated the trenches. Those are my Iron Lions. The offensive line, Vega, Ione, Nick Dawkins, JB Nelson, who got replaced by Cooper Cousins,
Mhm.
filled in for him at right guard. Played 15 snaps, actually had a good game. Any update on the JB Nelson injury and who's gonna possibly start right guard next week?
Did see that Sal Wormley was back in action in practice this week.
Nice.
He was a
I
little
like
nicked
that.
up. I know both him and JB ended up getting banged up. Didn't see anything new on JB Nelson. So not sure if we're gonna get any more details prior to game week. Dom DeLuca on the defensive side of the ball, also back in action this week in practice.
Let's
So
go. I
should get
love
it.
Big Dom,
Should get
baby.
him back. A little bit of a scare. Believe it was today at practice or today or yesterday. Nick Singleton absent, but it seems to be, from what I've uncovered, that it looks like it was likely just due to illness, so not due to injury.
Stomach bug.
Franklin, yeah, Franklin did not
Ooh,
comment. He
season.
did take part in the Zoom meetings or interviews with the media, which multiple Penn State media sources confirm that players would not do that if they were injured, just based on Franklin's policy and the way that they rolled. So interesting little nugget in there, but don't expect anything to more to come of it other than just getting over the old stomach bug. But yeah, definitely looking like they should be getting some guys back this week.
Yeah, he had an absolute game against Illinois, totaling 119 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, had that viral clip where he chip blocked the edge rusher, just completely flattened him to the turf.
Mhm.
Catches a tough pass, high pass, corrals it, has has the fortitude to handle it, turn up field, and just
Mhm.
absolutely truck stick a dude for
Yeah.
the touchdown. That was, I mean, if that doesn't sum up Nick Singleton in one play, I don't know what does. Like that's just pure toughness, effort, athleticism,
Yeah.
and just grit. That's how I sum up his game and
Going
fire.
back to going back to Abdul though, absolutely terrifying in that spiral. Like,
Oh my
especially
God,
when you
dude.
see
Yeah.
that last play as an opposing quarterback to he does just I don't know if it was just me,
Just
but
have
just
him
does an
staring at
outstanding
you the
job of
entire time. Like
staring at him, disguising himself
you're just
within
like,
the
oh,
action, within the trenches, and to think that you're getting that, the outside scot-free, you just got Abdul Carter flying at you. Just it was just a beautiful thing to watch, and to see him get that last sack and that fumble to basically end the game, even though it was pretty much in hand, was. But yeah, absolutely terrifying that QB spiral, and I would love
and
to see a lot more of that.
yeah. Well, I mean, Tom Allen again,
Yeah.
masterpiece, hanging in the Louvre, just drew it up so well. And then you have DDS 33 on the outside. It's
Hmm.
like you're worried about all that. Last thing I want to say on the Illinois game, Katron Allen, sixth 100-yard rushing game as a Penn State Nittany Lions,
Hmm.
and 89 of his 103 yards came after contact, just plowing through the Illinois defense. We said that the physicality was going to ramp up as we get into Big Ten play, and that was just the perfect game to set the tone for how we need to continue our play the rest of the way here as we go into the new Big Ten as number seven, Penn State hosts the UCLA Bruins, brand new to the Big Ten. Their second true Big Ten game. They did play Oregon last week. They played Indiana week two. They are 1-3, 0-2 in the conference. And this game will be on Fox's big noon kickoff. Line on this game minus 27 and a half, which is up actually from 26 where it opened. So much money early coming in on UCLA. I don't know if people are thinking it's going to be a bounce back spot, but 67% of tickets are on UCLA and 73% of the money with a little over 4,000 bets in. So that's why it jumped up probably a point. Over under for this game is 46 and a half. That's at minus 112 juice. That's probably going to go up to 47. This is all on DraftKings, and this is all on Wednesday, December 2nd, October 2nd.
Still spooky season. We're not in December yet.
I know. I'm getting spooky and Christmas mixed up. So, little historic facts on this meeting. All six have been between the years of 1963 and 1968. Roll the old-timey film. UCLA 4-2 in the series and 2-1 playing at State College again in the late 60s. The last game, 1968, the Lions won 21-6. Bruins also are 2-4 straight up and 5-1 against the spread in conference road openers. A little different here. Have to travel a little bit farther than just up down the West Coast, going to State College. And then they have to go back to LA to play Minnesota next week. So
Mhm.
a little bit like the Washington game on Friday of last week with that travel situation. And since 2015, Penn State is 28-3 straight up, only 17-11 against the spread as a Big Ten home favorite. And the under when they're Big Ten home favorites is 19, 11, and 1. My initial thoughts, I watched the Big Ten Network does this cool thing. They do Big Ten in 60, where they have
Mhm.
all games just compacted into an hour. Watch the Oregon UCLA game. UCLA is bad. I was not expecting them to be
Mhm.
this bad, but they were. Granted, they have a ton. Their injury list is so full, but they look absolutely awful. And fun fact that I heard during the announcement, they've only led in a game this season for a total of 2 minutes and 16 seconds.
Mm.
So just bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten right now. They're led by first year head coach Deshaun Foster. It's their first season post Chip Kelly, who's now the Ohio State offensive coordinator and Jabba the Hutt lookalike. Foster, he was the running back at UCLA from 98 to 2001. He was actually sick. Had a school record 301-yard game with 4 touchdowns against Washington. Both school records at the time, they're broken by both were broken by Maurice Jones-Drew and JD. Shout out a couple fantasy titles, fantasy football titles.
Likewise, I was
Yeah,
a frequent drafter of Maurice Jones-Drew.
same. I was adamant about getting him. So he ended his collegiate career in the top 10 in rushing yards, touchdowns, and points scored, all at UCLA. Drafted 34th overall by the Panthers in 2002. Injuries sort of plagued his career. I think he rushed for as high as like 800 yards one year. Played from 2002, 2007, then became, or most recently, was the UCLA running back coach for 7 years prior to this. So maintaining a little bit of what they had going with Chip Kelly. However, this season's just not going well. Their first game, they were down 13 nothing at halftime at Hawaii,
Mhm.
which understandable. First game going to Hawaii, but then came storming back 116 to 13, 16 nothing second half. Second game was their Big Ten opener at home against Indiana, got absolutely smoked 42-13. Third game, this is a tough schedule, man. What
Mhm.
who scheduled this? Chip Kelly, I guess. They go at LSU. Score was actually tied. I bet on this game was tied at 17 at halftime. I had UCLA or LSU in this game. They
Mhm.
didn't cover. I think it was 24. But yeah, they end up losing 34-17. So it's been a tale of two halves for them. Really have not put it together last week, down 28-10 to Oregon. Held them to 6 points in the second half, but only scored three. Again, just have not put a full game together. And their offensive coordinator is somewhat familiar to fans of Philly, Dave. We know this
Mhm.
guy pretty well.
Pretty well. Eric Bieniemy, former Chiefs mastermind, last season, as we know, did not go so well for him in the Commanders' offense. So he was a interesting to see the move that he made, as for a number of years, Bieniemy was considered, or widely considered, to be top tier head coaching candidate at several interviews. Was never able to get the role. So headed back to the college game, and man, it has been a struggle. Even just the dynamic between changing the offense, where Bieniemy is known to have a little bit more complex system. Even just simple things like
Very,
longer play names,
very
which
complex.
is different and definitely more difficult for the college game. And it even shows when you look at from a statistical perspective, they're last in Big Ten in points per game with 14.8, total yards per game 262, bottom of the barrel in passing yards per game, abysmal third down conversion rate at just shy of 28%. Another thing to note too is just the pace. So when you look at time of possession and managing the football, under Chip Kelly, they were averaging somewhere in the ballpark of like 80, 85 snaps a game on offense. This year, thus far, they're in the 50 to 55 range. So getting about 30, 35 to 40 less snaps per game on offense. Just the pace has gone down drastically. That, coupled with not being able to move the chains and get a passing game going, is just a recipe for disaster, which is really how it's unfolded, especially for the offensive side of the ball for the Bruins.
Dude, 27.9% third down conversion rate is just absolutely abysmal.
Hmm.
12 for 43. You're not winning games doing that. And then
Hmm.
31 penalties over 4 games. Not good.
Yep.
But yeah, Bieniemy, he's trying to. So their quarterback is Ethan Garbers, who is a senior. He's a dual threat quarterback, but Bieniemy's kind of treating him like Patrick Mahomes, like
Hmm.
calling plays like he's Patrick Mahomes. And Foster sort of inherited Chip Kelly's, recruiting classes, and Chip Kelly was notorious for not putting any focus on the offensive line. So it's
Yep.
like you're not giving this guy time to throw. You can't call Patrick
Hmm.
Mahomes plays. But this kid's been getting beat up this season. He suffered an ankle injury last week in the classic Big Ten matchup against Oregon, where they lost 34-13. He is likely to play against Penn State this week. Deshaun Foster at his presser, when he was asked about Garber's availability, he had a pretty funny quote, I would think. He said, maybe, said Foster, following a long pause. When I talked to Ethan, he told me he was playing. Foster said, so I would, unless we hold him out, he's going to try and get out there and play. So basically saying nothing in four
Yeah.
sentences and just basically leaving it up to Garbers, which is not what a head coach normally does or is supposed to do. If a guy's injured, you're supposed to be like, hey, let's take this one off. Let the backup, Justin Martin, a true sophomore, fill in. He was only 1 for 7 for 7 yards in relief of Garbers against Oregon. So not much to write home about. But like I said, this guy just no time to throw at all. Like I'm looking at his numbers from last season, and he put up decent numbers through 66% completion,
hmm
almost 1,000 yards, 984, or with the bowl game over 1,000 yards. Sorry, 1,136, 11 touchdowns to only 3 picks, 12 sacks all year,
hmm
35 rushes for 127 yards. And this year, in 4 games, he's been sacked 12 times. Has a 57.3% completion rate, 3 passing touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He threw 2 against Oregon last week, 5 fumbles, only 2 of them lost. And those 12 sacks, obviously, they bring it into the rushing total. So it brings his number down to some pretty funny yet awful numbers. He has the second most carries on the team at 27 rushes for -1 yards. No rushing touchdowns on the year. And the last 2 games is truly when he's been beaten up the most. 9 sacks, 13 carries, first -69 yards, just absolutely getting obliterated back there, Tuttle style, like just getting walloped.
hmm
And the main, um, not victims, but what's the opposite of a victim? Criminals,
Culprits.
culprits. The main culprits of this, his left tackle Ruben Unije, last 2 games against LSU and Oregon, 15 total pressures, 3 sacks allowed. Other side, their right tackle Garrett DiGiorgio against LSU and Oregon, last 2 games, 7 pressures combined, a QB hit, and a sack allowed. Their left guard, again, left side is just weak. Spencer Holstage, 10 pressures allowed, a sack. There's Oregon, and in total, 49 pressures allowed, third in the Big Ten. So it's looking like we had 7 sacks against Illinois. It's looking like we're going to bring the heat again,
hmm
especially against those tackles who are just so vulnerable.
Yeah. Not can't protect the quarterback, can't run the ball. It's been a recipe for disaster. And look, you lose your head coach, got a whole new offensive scheme, whole new coaching staff. There's going to be some turnover there. There's going to take some time to rebuild. It was just a tough situation. You had Garbers who played last year. They had what they thought was the heir apparent at QB waiting in the wings with 5-star Dante Moore, who after Chip Kelly
Hmm.
left said, F this, I'm out. So he left. So you got Garbers, you got a depleted offensive line. We'll get into the defense, but also depleted there. So yeah, it's just been a rough go of it on the offensive side of the ball, and for a defense that is also struggling to have to be out there as often as they are, they're finding themselves down in ball games, having to throw when you have to throw and you can't get the time to be able to throw. You're not going to be able to win games that way.
Yeah, like we said in the beginning, they have a laundry list of injuries. And watching the game again, the announcer had a good point. They've sort of been trying to figure out their starting five, front five offensive line since Chip Kelly, because he did
Mhm.
not recruit the offensive line. So it's
Yeah.
really been the biggest weakness for them for the past half decade, I would say. And it really shows in their rushing totals. They're last in the Big Ten in rushing yards per game by a lot. They only average 57 yards per game with one touchdown on the season. That's 132nd of 133 FBS teams. In the Big Ten, they're second to last. Minnesota is averaging 101.4 rushing yards per game compared to their 57, just to put that in perspective.
Mhm.
And rushing touchdowns, they have one. Illinois and Washington are second to last. They're tied with four. And just to add a little tip of our hat to the Nits, Penn State number one in the Big Ten with 251 rushing yards per game. They are ninth in the FBS. So UCLA, the Bruins, they lost Carson Steele to the NFL draft. He's now playing with the Chiefs, playing some snaps actually with Pacheco out.
Mhm.
They turn to running back TJ Harden, the junior, who had 13 carries for 53 yards versus Oregon. Doesn't sound like a huge stat line, but it was the first game the Bruins had a rusher that went over 50 yards this season. He's also a dual threat. He's the team leader in receptions with 13 catches for 88 yards. And on the ground, he has 41 rushing yards or 41 rushes, sorry, for 125 yards and that lone touchdown. And at receiver, they have some big boys, Dave,
Mhm.
starting with the most targeted guy, wide receiver Rico Flores Jr. from Notre Dame. What can you tell us about him? 6'2", 205. Ooh,
Yeah, Rico's definitely been the primary target. Like you mentioned, transferring over from Notre Dame, he gets the majority of the target share, as shown the most production. Had a touchdown grab against Oregon, 12 catches on the year, 187 yards. But he is definitely the go-to target in this offense. So will be a little bit of a test for the cornerback room for lockdown you, but don't see it as a test that they cannot handle, but definitely the primary focus on the offense. And going back to the running back, TJ Harden, he's a talented kid. He just doesn't have any room to be able to maneuver. Going back to the offensive line, not to beat a dead horse here, but we talk about Garbers, we can't have time, doesn't have time to throw. Harden also doesn't have much room to work with when he's getting the ball and not
true.
able to
Very
get the
true.
ball a lot because they've been playing from behind so much. But
Probably why he's the
definitely
leader
Rico Flores is the one to
receptions.
look out for. Yeah.
So just
Also,
not
just want to go back to, so not to gloss over it, and I know we're talking about UCLA here, but 251 rushing yards per game for Penn State. I remember when we started this podcast and we were talking about and banging our heads, why the hell can we not run the football? Now look at us, baby.
Look at us
Look
now.
at us now.
We've, yeah, that's since we started. We're like, I pray for the day that we have just an absolute beast of an offensive line, and it is growing. We planted the
Mhm.
seed, manifested it. It's growing into a jungle. Another weapon of theirs that had a good game against Oregon. True freshman Quasi Gilmore, wide receiver again, another big body, 6'2", 180. Seven targets against Oregon, four catches for 31 yards. Leading receiver got a lot more attention in this game than the previous three, so eyes on him.
Mhm.
Another big boy in the receiving game, their tight end, Molokai Matavo, junior, transferred from Oregon in 2023. He has 16 targets on the year, only 8 catches, but for 106 yards along of 21 yards. So didn't all come in one big catch. And he also has 54 yards after the catch, so able to break tackles. That was the other thing I noticed watching that game. It was like basically, I think 6 players, 5, 6 players were Oregon transfers.
Hmm.
So it was kind of just like the Oregon guys who just didn't get time or didn't play going to UCLA and forming their own team. Last guy I just want to mention on offense. I think he's the most explosive player, but just hasn't done anything this year. Wide receiver J. Michael Sturdivant. He's a junior again, a 2023 transfer from Cal. Another big body, 6'3", 205 pounds, 14 targets, so only two less than their running back DJ Harden. But on those 14 targets, he has 5 catches, 2 drops in the season, only 62 yards. And on the 4 contested catches that were thrown his way, he has no receptions, but an interception when Garber does that. And speaking of jump balls, just one last thing. He also loves throwing the ball up to Rico Flores. He's thrown 9 contested catches to him. Rico's came down with 6 of them, but Garber's also thrown 2 interceptions when he just tosses up to Rico. So kind of do or die situation for him. Mostly, again, going back to that offensive line, just pressure on him. He tossing up to one of his big guys. And as we move on to the defense, it doesn't get much better. The second most yards allowed per game at 398.3, only a half a yard lower than Purdue's defense in the Big Ten. They've given up 1,593 total yards in 4 games. Purdue's given up 1,595 in 4 games. So only 2 yards less than Purdue, who's again bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten. They are also bottom of the barrel in pass defense. This is just oof, abysmal. 291 yards allowed through the air. That's 126th in the FBS. Last week, Dylan Gabriel sliced and diced them like a surgeon. 32 of 41 for 278, 3 touchdowns. Did throw an interception, which we'll talk about, but his number one guy, Tez Johnson, 11 catches, 121, and a touchdown. Just they got him the ball in any and every situation they could. And UCLA won. We'll talk about this again. One of the worst tackling teams in college football.
Hmm.
Uh, Points per game, they're giving up over 30, second to worst in the Big Ten, 123 points over 4 games. Lastly, their third down defense, just as bad as their third down offense. They are the worst team in the FBS on third down, giving up, letting opponents convert over 58% of the time on third down. So not looking good on defense for UCLA. I mean, you just look at that Indiana game, 42 points given up. But like we said, laundry list of injuries starting up front in the trenches. Deshaun Foster, he wanted the stalwarts at his D tackle positions to be Jay Tao, who's currently playing as a senior captain. Number 93, you'll see him, big boy, 6'3", 325. He wanted him and Keanu Williams, another big boy, 6'5", 310. Again, transfer from Oregon. But he did announce in his presser that Keanu Williams is out for the season. So that kind of twisted the plan where he was going to just roll with those two and then kind of roll with the hot edge rusher because they have a lot of depth at edge, apparently, according to him. Roll with the hot hand at edge rusher, but now they kind of switch things up, turn some guys over on the inside. Another guy on the injury list, Navy transfer edge rusher Jacob Busick. So the depth that Foster was talking about at edge rusher is getting tested early and honestly failing pretty miserably. Only 5 sacks on the season. That's pretty pretty pathetic.
Mhm.
39 missed tackles on the year. That's what I want to talk about the most. They are so I that noticed it so clearly during that game. They're so bad at breaking down tackling.
Mhm.
Almost 10 missed tackles per game. Again, injuries have a part of it, but they also lost. We'll go to their defensive line to the trenches. 26 sacks to the NFL draft. They lost, obviously, Latu. He had 13 sacks for them. He was the 15th overall pick to the Colts. Gabriel Murphy had 8 sacks for them. He's now playing for the Vikings. And Grayson Murphy had 5 sacks for them, now playing for the Dolphins. So losing the top five tacklers on that unit is not a recipe for success for a first year head coach. But they do have Jay Tao. He will have some sort of presence in this game. He's tied for second on the team with 7 pressures, but mainly a run stopper, only an 8% win rate on pass rushes this year, and he has 3 missed tackles on the year. So their defense kind of they run it's almost like a mini Diaz light defense, if you will. They basically have their their 3 set linemen, and then they love to have their linebackers all rotate in and out, and they cover every single lineman. So you don't know who's rushing,
Mhm.
who's dropping into coverage. So some of those linebackers kind of pretty good. People to watch out for. Mainly Kane Madrano, 5th year senior, the team's leader in pressures with 9, 3 QB hits, but also the team leader in missed tackles. And then there's 2 hybrid linebackers that I saw. Number 2, he played outside edge rusher, and then number 49, who they were absolutely raving about. I think it was number 2 is Oladejo,
Mhm.
your transfer from Cal, and then 49 was he had like a like German last name. It's like
Schweisinger.
Schweisinger. What do you know about those two? I didn't get a lot from the broadcast because it was just jumping.
Yeah, I mean they definitely shown some promise. So Oladejo 7 pressures on the year, but just a 4.6% win rate. Schweisinger got his first nod or first start at LSU. 25 tackles last 2 games. So
Damn.
again, 25 tackles, but granted they're on the field a lot. You see that with Kane Madrano as well, the other
Yeah.
linebacker that I mentioned, second on the team in tackles last year with 56, but lead, high tackle rate, but also a lot of missed tackles, like you mentioned, but they are on the field a lot. And listen, you mentioned the production that they lost to the NFL. And when you look at a school like UCLA, whether obviously now in the Big Ten, we're in the Pac-12, they just don't recruit from a football standpoint at the level to be able to replace that type of production. But they are also, so we mentioned Chip Kelly's departure and Deshaun Foster taking over, but more so even on the defensive side of the ball, losing Danton Lynn, who we know or Penn State fans are familiar with, former Penn State cornerback, but had really gotten that defense with that talent. Granted, yes, he had some really great players, but was able to get that defense to where it was a formidable unit And a lot of the fan base was upset actually at the end of last year, where they actually wanted Chip fired after the end of last season, where they had that loss to Arizona State, beat USC, but then I think it was the last week of the year, got blown out by Cal. And a lot of folks thought they would have or should have been able to keep Danton Lynn as he just walked across the city over to USC, who's now the defensive coordinator at USC and has shown already the type of improvement that he can bring to that program, who has struggled mightily on defense. But they are definitely feeling the pain of losing what Danton Lynn had put together on the defensive side of the ball, for sure.
I mean, being out of 133 FBS teams, being 126 the pass defense, and then
Hmm.
bottom in third down conversion, that's just that says everything
Yeah.
right there. So going to their secondary again, it just injuries and guys stepping into roles, transfers, having to communicate. They were in a lot of zone, I noticed, which Oregon took complete advantage of them just not being able to communicate and being on the same page. Going back to their head coach, Foster did announce that will name Kanye Clark, redshirt freshman. He will be out for the season. He was injured during LSU. He had 5 targets on the season, only one catch allowed for 6 yards, and had two pass breakups on the season. So big loss to them on the outside. Their big guy in the secondary is Brian Addison. Again, another transfer from Oregon. He's a 6-year senior. You'll be seeing him wearing number 4. He is the captain and leader of that defense, even though you'll see Jay Towell wearing that captain patch as well. He had a 96-yard pick six of Dylan Gabriel last week, which was pretty sick. Dude,
Hmm.
Dylan Gabriel's first interception of the season, which, by the way, dude's throwing 81.5% completion rate. Dylan Gabriel. I
Yeah,
mean, granted, a lot of them are bubble screens and swing passes, but 81.5, that's insane.
dink and dunk Dylan.
And Brian Addison playing kind of like a free safety center fielder role, picks him off in the red zone. 96-yard pick six. That was really cool to watch.
Hmm.
Their other safeties, again, very solid. Ramon Henderson, number 11, senior transfer from Notre Dame. He is the second most targeted player on the team with 22 targets his way. He's allowed 13 catches for 177 yards, but has three forced incompletions, three pass breakups, one touchdown allowed with a pick, and only an 81.1 NFL pass rating against him. And then I found the mark watching that game. I don't know what position. I think it's like the star position, line position.
Hmm.
KJ Wallace, number 7, transfer from Notre Dame, where he played out for 3 seasons, and then most recently Georgia Tech, 2 seasons. So last week versus Tez Johnson, he allowed 7 catches on 7 passes thrown against him for 58 yards, allowed 5 first downs and a touchdown. And this season, he has 4 coverage penalties. And Ramon Henderson is the second most targeted. He's the most targeted with 30 this year. So teams are noticing him on tape and being like, hey, if number 7's caught in a one-on-one situation, go after him. Another guy I noticed that could be a possible mark again, Oregon transfer, cornerback Jalen Davies. We're number 6 on the outside. On the season, 10 targets, allowed 8 catches for 106 yards. Does have 2 forced incompletions, 2 pass breakups, but has 2 touchdowns allowed. That's leading the team. And again, 4 coverage penalties. One big pass interference against Oregon in the end zone on a jump ball against it wasn't Tez, it was one of their other big receivers, but just completely mauled him. And then just looks at the ref like, whoa. Like every time Mike does, they score on the very next play. Later in the game, he is burnt by the guy, Tez Johnson, for a 52-yard touchdown grab on a crosser. And this year, quarterbacks have an NFL passer rating of 150.4 against this guy. So, worst passing defense, the 2 guys to look for KJ Wallace, number 7, playing that star lion position. And then on the outside, Jalen Davies, number 6. Look out for them.
It's a secondary full of scarecrows.
It really is. It was, dude, watching Dylan Gabriel operate against them, it was like they run this like a off zone, and it was just him just dipping, dunking under, and then just
Mhm.
they can't tackle. So it's
Yeah.
like, all right, make a play, guys. So given all that, what do you think is the matchup that we have to win in order to beat the Bruins and avoid a catastrophic? It would be a catastrophic upset.
Yeah, I think really it just comes down to what's what's worked against UCLA all season and what Penn State has shown that they've been able to do. And this should bode well where they're just taking advantage of UCLA's weakness, which is dominate the time of possession battle and move the chains. So we talked about it a little bit in depth already, but Penn State converting more than half of the third downs, 51.2% on the year, compared to UCLA's, like we said, just less than 28%. So UCLA, again, 123rd in the FBS and third down conversion rate on offense, which Penn State's defense, being a top 5, top 6 total defense, should continue to showcase why they're a top tier defense and be able to get UCLA off the field and get to the quarterback. And then on the offensive side of the ball, control the ball, continue the ground and pound with the running game. Would love to see a little bit more explosive plays. Now, we were accustomed to them the first couple of weeks of the year. I think we just had one 20 plus yard play against Illinois. Granted, he didn't quite need it because we were able to dominate the run game in the fashion that they did, but would love to see Drew take advantage of a very porous secondary. But ultimately, I think the name of the game here is just control the rock. And one thing too is just don't hurt yourself. Penn State also 28 penalties so far this year, probably a little bit more, or I'm not even gonna say a little bit. It's way too many penalties. So as long as they don't hurt themselves and take care of the football and move the chains, this spread should come easy.
Yeah, less penalties than UCLA, thank God.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, definitely need to cut down on the penalties, especially offensive line. I feel like there's been way too many illegal formations, false starts
yeah.
that just are unnecessary, kill drive killers. So I'm gonna go UCLA. We said 12 sacks given up. Garber's just getting absolutely beat up back there. They've only played 4 games, so 3 sacks per game. Illinois, we had 7 sacks. So talked about their tackles. I want to see DDS and Abdul have
Mhm.
2 each. Get to the quarterback, force Garber to throw those contested catches that he loves throwing to his big receivers. Maybe AJ Harris can actually have an actual pick six without a penalty.
Mhm.
I can also see Zacchaeus Wheatley playing that kind of center fielder role and having interception with Garber getting pressure in his face and his ability to read route concepts, I think he's going to be able to bait him and get a turnover.
Hmm.
I think this will be a multiple turnover game, and I think this will be another 5+ sack game easily.
Hmm.
Just because I love the way that they're using Abdul,
Yep.
edge, stand-up linebacker, QB spy, where he's just absolutely lethal, like we talked about. If you're an opposing quarterback trying to do different hot routes and reads, and he's just staring you down the face, you're just like, oh God, this guy's about to absolutely ruin my life. So I didn't know. So this is we're on a little California dreaming trip here. Well, I mean, we're at home against UCLA, but then we go at USC before our second bye, correct?
Correct.
So a little California dreaming there.
That's right. The new Big Ten, baby.
So we're home and then, yeah, we're gonna go. Do we know when we're going out to LA?
Believe they said Thursday night. I want to say Thursday night. They're headed out
Okay.
to California. So I think most teams, as they become accustomed, have elected to go out a little bit earlier, but they're gonna stay at home during the practice week and head out Thursday night for that USC game. Believe they announced it'll be the Saturday 3:30 CBS game.
Yes. Saw that as well. I kind of wanted it to be a primetime game, but whatever. 3:30 is
Hmm.
good for me. Let's go. Lastly, in this matchup, Dave, your Iron Lion to watch. We've been on kind of fire with these.
Hmm.
Last
Not to
week,
brag, but we have.
and not to toot our own horn, but toot toot. Yeah, last week, both of our guys crushed it.
Hmm.
Who do you have this week?
So this week, love what you said about DDS and Abdul. I think definitely anticipate those happening. I am looking to guy I've talked about a lot. Love what I've seen so far. Tony Rojas. Think him, DDS, and Abdul could have a big game here. So Tony, Kobe King, who I'm not going to mention here, but I am going to bring up, who has had a stellar season thus far and had a
Not going to
remarkable
mention, but
game.
I'm going to bring them up
But I'm
anyway.
going to bring him up.
Dude,
So, but I
he
do
had
think
such a good game against Illinois, by the way. I forgot to talk about him in the recap. He was literally everywhere I looked.
literally all over the
It
field.
was 41 making a play somewhere.
Yep.
Shout out Kobe King.
Shout out Kobe King.
Shout
But
out
yeah,
hometown.
I
Is that
think
no, that's right.
Tony Rojas, three tackles, one for
Motor
loss
City.
against Illinois. You mentioned about looking for a couple turnovers this game. I think this is prime to be situation where Garber gets under duress. If it's him or if it's the backup Martin, where he's right place, right time, be able to pick off the football. But I think with Abdul and DDS going to garner a lot of attention from an already struggling, porous offensive line. I look for definitely at least a couple, maybe more opportunities for Tony to be able to wreak some havoc. So I think he should have a field day. And then another name just to keep in mind is Dakari Nelson, who
Yes.
got his
Yes.
first run at the linebacker spot. So we've talked about where he's transitioned or made that transition during fall camp from safety to linebacker, just given his size at 6'3", 220. So he registered 20 snaps against the Illini. I believe he had one tackle, if I'm not mistaken, and then also continues to play a huge role in special teams. 2 weeks in a row, named special teams player of the week internally with Penn State. So hoping to be able to, especially given the spread and what we're anticipating the outcome to be here, to see Dakari to be able to get some more run at the linebacker spot. I've seen a lot of great feedback from Tony, from Kobe about what he's brought to that room with his knowledge of the position, be able to give some tips and pointers about how to adapt and how to react in pass coverage. So looking for Dakari to continue to really shine as he transitions to that role.
Yeah. He's gone up from week 4, 15 total snaps to 20 against
Hmm.
Illinois. So I again I'm running it back. They were so good last week. I got to run it back. The interior of the Nittany Lions offensive line. Big Ione, Nick Dawkins, right guard we talked about, Cooper Cousins, JB Nelson, maybe Sal Wormley's coming back, but I'm running it back with them. They absolutely manhandled Illinois' front seven. Even
Mhm.
getting to the second level, just crushing linebackers. They averaging 5.8 yards per rush, including the negative 34 yards on 5 sacks, which still puts us over 1,000 rushing yards total on the season as a team. So we're one of three Big Ten teams to have over 1,000 rushing yards. We have 1,004 ahead of Iowa. Love it.
Love it, baby.
Rushing. They have 1,001. Same game played for Indiana leads the Big Ten in rushing with 1,053. But again, they have 5 games played. So going back to that pass defense, I'm running back with the big boys up front, but then I'm also looking for Julian Fleming. I think it's time to get him involved. I think Kotelnicki's going to start drawing up some stuff. I've seen a little bit in the last 2 games. Only 2 catches on 2 targets last week for 9 yards, but they're trying to get him involved. The
Mhm.
last 2 weeks, he's had 55 snaps out wide where he normally plays and only 35 in the slot. Not only up to 35 in the slot.
Yeah.
So they're moving him around, trying to get him mismatched against different guys. And I think if he's against KJ Wallace or Jalen Davies, as we talked about, with their proclivity to get coverage penalties, throw him the ball, get him involved early and often,
Mhm.
just run what Oregon did. Just quick screens, quick slants, option routes with him, get him going, make them come up, defend that,
Yeah.
burn them deep. What is your prediction for this game? I called for what, 5+ sacks and 2 turnovers. So that's that's a pretty hefty outtake there.
Mhm.
But what's your prediction for the game with a 27.27.5 point spread, 46.5 total?
Yeah, I think they cover this. I think the defense shines again. I think UCLA maybe gets one score in mop up duty, but I'm gonna go with 42-7 Penn State.
Wow, I literally wrote down 45-6.
Ah.
I added one field goal. That was about to be wow, exactly the same
Spot
thing.
on, man.
Speaking of exactly the same thing, me and the Croatian Bear, the Italian versus the Croatian, are pretty much locked up in the Big Ten betting bonanza right now, which we are going to get into week 6 of the greatest betting competition on planet Earth. Week 6, Big Ten betting bonanza. Roll it.